Mr. Speaker. I ask for unanimous consent to dispense with reading of HJM 1.
Unanimous consent has been requested. Is there objection? Hearing none, the good lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I get started on this memorial, I want to share a little bit about what this memorial is about. This memorial is about federalism and a state's rights or their sovereignty to make decisions for ourselves. It is about the state sovereignty that we have as individuals of this state. This is not a memorial about defining marriage. It's about who gets to define marriage. Do we want the state to make those decisions, or do we want to allow the Supreme Court to make those decisions? Everyone's entitled to their viewpoint on marriage, but what I'm asking for in this resolution is that these decisions need to be made in the state. So to give you a little background, in 2015, the Supreme Court handed down a 4-5 decision in Obergefell versus Hodges. And what they claimed was, they claimed to legalize same-sex marriage nationwide. And it confused marriage laws and constitutions across the country. Remember, this same Supreme Court used this same reasoning to make its decision for a right to privacy on Roe versus Wade. And that's how they justified abortion, which, as we know, was overturned 50 years later. So we've been into this decision of Obergefell for about 10 years now. The 4-5 decision, the 4 dissenting decisions, they argued that the Supreme Court had exceeded its constitutional authority, it's undermined state sovereignty, and it disrupted the democratic process. The same process that we use to make decisions on wolf hunting in our states or marijuana, those kinds of decisions, they're not defined in the Constitution. The federal government has no authority over those kinds of decisions. So while the justices, they didn't agree on every point in this dissension, they all agreed on one thing, that the Constitution did not guarantee a right to same-sex marriage, and that's what this case was about. I want to just share a few of the 4 dissenting voices as some of their concerns. Justice John Roberts criticized the court for acting as a legislature by trying to redefine the word marriage. He emphasized that the Constitution doesn't define marriage. That means it's a state issue. It is not something the Supreme Court should be doing. And he also argued that it was a clear example of judicial activism. Scalia warned that going down this route would allow unelected judges to make decisions over the people in our states. And they criticized the majority for trying to create a new right that is not found in the Constitution. Clarence Thomas said liberty was misinterpreted and argued that the majority had misinterpreted the concept of liberty, and they defined this in the Due Process Clause. And Samuel Alito, the final dissenting voice, talked about traditional marriage as deeply rooted in culture and history, and he warned that the decision would stigmatize those who didn't believe that this court ruling, who did have a different view of marriage. And he brought up that this judicial overreach would cause conflict down the road in people that held a different belief of marriage than what the Supreme Court ruled. So their common concerns: federalism, taking authority away from the states, judicial activism, overstepping the role of judges, and then disenfranchising voters. We have laws on our books that we have decided as a state that citizens get to come and testify on. If we start turning over decisions that aren't the authority of the federal government to our judiciary, we lose debate, we lose conversations. There was a lot of lively conversation on this in committee, and all those decisions would be suppressed. So obviously the big issue here is this, the federal government does not have the authority to just create rights out of thin air. And just because you might agree with their decision and how they define marriage or as a right, I would ask you to substitute any other issue and ask yourself, do I want the federal government creating rights and for us, for Idahoans? So what if the federal government redefined property rights or nationalized water rights? What does that look like if they came up with some new fair use policy or came up with different ways to define property rights? That is not a decision for the judges. It is a decision for the states and how we define property rights, what we do with our water rights. We do not want to nationalize decisions like this. I guess an example for that is if they came up with a nationalized water, actually a new energy policy. If they came up with a new energy policy and just said, we believe dams are bad for the environment, so Idaho, you're going to have to follow this ruling and tear out your dams. We do not want that. We want to be having these conversations in our states. So the language is a lot of whereases, like most of these resolutions are. I'll just briefly go through them. On line 6, we talk about the Supreme Court decision conflicts with the Constitution. Lines 10, liberty as defined by the government. Liberty as freedom from government, not as given by government. The redefinition of liberty that they've done. We talk about the vision of human rights. Page 1, line 21, undermining human dignity. And then lines 23, misuse of the Constitutional's due process clause. And that's where they came up with this new right to a marriage. A big concern, and this was of the dissenting votes and of it's in this resolution, is the threats to religious liberty. And I actually found a lot of examples of this that's happening throughout our country that's directly related to the Obergefell decision. Christians across the nation are being targeted. So there was the Kentucky County Clerk, Kim Davis, you may remember, who after the Obergefell ruling was told she had to sign a marriage license for a same-sex marriage. This was deeply against her religious beliefs. She asked for a religious exemption, and she was thrown in jail for six days. Now, this is being challenged, and actually, this case is going to be in a higher court come this week. I think it's this week. So they will be addressing this on this issue. Jack Phillips was the cake maker who felt compelled to not support a type of marriage he did not agree with. Lori Smith was given fines. She's lost her business license for a similar issue. There was Elaine Hugan, a photographer who had religious beliefs that were violated, and a person with the flowers that wanted to not support something that was against their religious beliefs. And then a very important one that happened just 10 days ago. Oh, actually, wait, one more. The Catholic Charities of Philadelphia, with their adoption, they were removed from a roster because of their beliefs on marriage, their religious beliefs on marriage. So these are big issues, and these are state issues. This is it's snowballing effect across the country. So one example right here in Idaho, and actually about 10 days ago, this suit just got filed, and it is Idaho National Guard Major David Worley is being persecuted because of his beliefs about marriage and sexuality. And he lost his position in the Idaho National Guard, and now there's a current lawsuit against Brad Little, and I guess I can say that because it's the gentleman on the second floor, but that's what the lawsuit says. Major General Timothy Donnellan and Brigadier General James Packwood. And these are because these lawsuits are coming up because people have strongly held religious beliefs, and that is a right that's in our Constitution that's being violated. Trying to get it all out so there's no questions of what this does. We talk about unjust redefinition of marriage. We talk that the legislature should be making laws, not the courts. And then we get to the therefore be it resolved. What this resolution does is it rejects the Obergefell decision. It just says we don't recognize unconstitutional decisions by courts. We're calling for a reversal of the Supreme Court decision and asking them, a reversal, what that would look like is asking them to revisit the case. And it sounds like there's going to be some cases coming up, actually one from Idaho that might actually be that case. And then we're asking them to restore state authority. This is a state's rights. If the Supreme Court can start creating all kinds of new rights that they want to use to push down onto states, you can see this could end badly for Idaho. And then we also asked for the chief clerk of the House to send a copy of our memorial to the Supreme Court. Now, they can ignore this. They can ignore it, but they can also take note that we understand there has been an overreach in the decision-making for something they don't have the authority to do. Again, I really want to reiterate this. This is to restore federalism, calling for the issue of marriage laws to the states, not to the federal government. And I have a little bit more, but I think I'm going to end it there because I think my point's clear, and I know we have a lunch. And with that, I'll ask for your green light on this resolution.
Thank you.